Hey there, my name is Todd Heslin. I am a full stack developer from Wellington in New Zealand, and I am creating a video today to show you how I use the npm init command with a custom repo that I've put together. So this is sort of in response to the syntax podcast, which Wes and Scott put together. There was a question about how do you kind of take your configuration from one project into another without just copying and pasting it. And Scott said he just copied and pasted it, and I empathize with that because that's what I used to do. And Wes installs everything globally, which is also pretty good. This particular method works quite well when you just want to get a new project set up and running. What I have found with the global setup is the moment you want to bring someone else onto the project, you got to waste about half a day trying to get them set up and making sure they have all the right same global dependency versions. So it's fine when you're working by yourself. It's more of a problem once you are working with anyone else. And in most projects, I'm at least working with one other person. So I'm going to show you how I use this command. Now, most people will be familiar with npm init. I'm going to create a new directory here. So let's just go call it, jump in here. Let's just call it video for YouTube. Terrible name, but that's fine. Now, npm init. So npm init is usually what you would just do to bring up the dialog and fill in, most of us go enter, 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 enter. So we do the -f to say force, and you just get yourself a new directory, which is lovely. But what people don't realize is that you can actually put in a package name here. So I've got one which is published under my own organization, my last name, Heslin, and it's Fastify, which is my favorite Node.js framework for a lot of other reasons. Now, they already had an NPM, they had like a create Fastify application, and I've kind of forked that and turned it into my own version. That's not really the point. The point is that you can do npm init and then any project and it would work. Now, the reason why this works is because I've actually published it as create-fastify. So this create dash is actually the magic here. Now, most people will be familiar with create React app or create something, and the way that actually works is that when you run npx and then create React app, it's exactly the same thing as if you did npm init React app. That's it. The create dash is just this kind of prefix that kind of gets added on. So I'm going to run this and then we'll see what it does, and then I'll kind of show you how it's kind of made up. But what this effectively does is you can bring together all of your dependencies and libraries and packages and settings and everything else all into your own package, your own like create React app. And then you can just run this npm init and then your own package name, and it will just create it for you. So you can have as many of these as you really want. This is my specific one for Fastify, and we'll have a look at what it kind of creates in a moment. The main problem I've ever had doing this was actually running it not when you're in its own directory, because it doesn't actually create a new directory for you. You could have a script that does that, but anyway. So let's have a look at what it actually creates, and then we'll see how it does it. So if I go and open this in VS Code, so what it does is it actually takes, this folder structure is actually coming from the Fastify, create Fastify application. But I've added all of my own personal configuration in. So we've got these different, for example, util and lib are both directories that I have added into this project. And I can give you a little demo of why this is kind of cool, but I also have a package.json file in each of them. And the kind of cool little thing here, if I can just demonstrate this, is that because I have, I'm not using Babel or anything else here, I'm purely using just normal vanilla, Node. This lib is actually linked in the package.json file here, and it's actually done through this file::lib. So what that means is that when I'm in my, well, any directory at all, I can actually go const hasura equals require. And when I type in lib, if I can type lib correctly, it will actually bring up the, oh, sorry, it's not going to bring it up because I have to install it. So one thing I've totally forgot. So when you run the npm init, it will run that binary, like pull in that package and then generate all the files for you, which is lovely with all the configuration. But it doesn't actually install the dependencies. So I always forget to do this, and then I try and show someone and realize that I haven't installed the dependencies. So I'm going to let that kind of run. While that's running, I'll jump over to the actual package. So this is the ESLint Fastify package itself. So we can see here that it actually has this CMD JS, and this here has a bunch of things. So I've got this write package function here. And what this is doing is this is adding all of my custom configuration. So this is the lib that I was talking about, and I have a similar one called util. But I always add node fetch, and these are some Fastify dependencies that I always want to add in my Fastify project. I always like UUID, and here is where I add all my ESLint. So I've got Prettier here, I've got ESLint, I've got NodeMon running. And I also, if you see here, I've also got my own ESLint config. So just like Wes has his own ESLint config, I've got my own published. And this way I can kind of publish that separately. But any new project I start, it brings that in, and it will just keep up to date with that. I also have my scripts. So I add a particular debug here. And what is really cool, if I jump into templates, the templates here is all of this stuff is what gets copied across, but I also include my VS Code launch.json, which means that out of the box, I get all of my debugging set up immediately, which is just absolutely beautiful. I can attach it to NodeMon, or I can actually run the project from using the Node process in the debugger. The kind of the difference between these two, if you want to debug anything from startup, you really want to be running this particular debugger, because it's going to actually, you can do a breakpoint on the very first line of code, where this one's going to be attaching to NodeMon, which is good because the debugger will reattach every time that's the restart true. It will reattach every time you save a file and NodeMon starts the process. But it doesn't actually, it's not really good, because if you're trying to debug something at the very beginning of your startup of your application, could be like connecting to Mongo or whatever you do at the beginning of your app before you're waiting for requests, it will actually skip over that. The debugger will kind of attach at the end of that whole setup thing, so you can't actually debug anything there. So I keep both of these handy, and the number of times that I have to debug something at the beginning of the script, so I have to find another project where I know I've solved this problem before, and then I have to go find that config and bring that in. It's just a pain. So by adding this all into my kind of create new project script, it kind of makes it much easier. So you can see here I've got my ESLint file here that actually extends my ESLint config. I've got a Docker file here. I also have a cloud build. So this is actually what we can use to run on Google Cloud Run, which is a pretty handy hosting service for this type of application that I write. And I also have the Apollo config, because typically I'll be running Hasura also separately. And by doing this in terms of setting it up in Apollo, it pretty much, as long as it's run, the Hasura instance is running, it's just out of the box going to work. So here's where all my files are. One more thing is task file. If you visit taskfile.dev, a very cool way of constructing a whole bunch of different scripts together. But anyway, so these are all the templates that I bring in. And then this CMD is what gets executed, and I can kind of attach different dependencies and things like that. So now we're seeing this. This is obviously what was run. And if we jump back to the other one, so this is now, I've installed my dependencies. Let's see if I can do this. So if I do Hasura, there we go. So lib/Hasura, because this lib directory has a package.json file in it, then anything that I add in here, so it could be like Mongo or Hasura or something else, I can just import it. And the really neat thing is there's no extra tooling around this. It just works. It's just regular node, regular npm, and hasura dot. That's actually a function. So I also get query. So you'll see here that I also get the IntelliSense that comes through from JSDoc. So even though I don't use TypeScript at all in any of my projects, I pretty much only use vanilla JavaScript. I actually, whenever I'm doing anything in a lib or a util, I'll make good use of JSDoc. And what that really helps me do is that when I'm consuming this code within my application code, it's going to give me all the nice type sense as we go through it. So we've got query, we've got input, and we've got session variables. And this is what makes a Hasura GraphQL request. So that is why I have this package.json file, because that's required for this to work. And it's the same for util. So I've got this little match utility, which is kind of like a switch statement, but in a more functional way. And I use it all the time. So I just bring it in. There's also, if you ever use sleep, so when you want to do like a set timeout, but wrap it up as a promise. So you want to have, an await, a sync await, and then do like sleep 2000 milliseconds. That's sort of something that I would add into my utils because I want to bring it along with me. I haven't actually got it in this particular example. So this is what is generated. It's all my application code. Some of this was already generated by Fastify. That was what they set up originally. And then I just brought in all the extra stuff that I use specifically for my projects. So you could do the same thing for an Express app, for a Vue app, for a React app. It really doesn't matter. The main thing you need to do is you create a package that is going to look something like this one, and it will actually generate the files for you. And when you run the npm init, sorry, my Mac is running a bit slow. When you run npm init with your package name, it will npx install everything for you. It'll bring the files down for you. You still have to run npm install, and then you've got your project config, build tools, everything all up and running, always exactly the same in the same place. And the nice thing about this is that whenever I kind of make an iteration, like if I want to add that sleep module back into my project, I would add it back in to this particular one and do a new publish to npm. And then every future project, no matter what computer I'm on, it would just work, just as if I'm running Create React App. So that's the way that I get around this configuration and carrying it with me without having to kind of do a lot of copy and pasting. Hopefully this was useful, and let me know if you have any comments. Cheers.